Hi, this is Wanda from Alanda Craft, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a quick and easy tote bag, and I'm going to be making it out of an old curtain that I bought from an op shop, a bit like your thrift or Goodwill stores. Now my granddaughter Sinedra was visiting and we both liked the fabric and thought it would make her a nice bag, and as you can see I've started to unpick it because it's such a lovely fabric and I don't want to waste any of it, and I can and will be using it for multiple projects. The first thing we need to do is cut two pieces of fabric for our handles, and these each measure 5 inches by 26 inches. We take each piece and we fold it in half and press it to form a nice crease down the centre, and you can see that I've already done that. Then we open up the strip and fold 1/2 into the centre on one side and press it all the way down the strip. And once we've done that, we do exactly the same on the other side, fold the piece into the centre and give it a good press. Once we've done that, we fold it in half again and give it a press. And we'll do exactly the same with the other strip, and this is what they look like. And now what we're going to do is tip stitch along both sides of the handle, and we're going to use about 1/8 of an inch. You can make it a little smaller or a little bigger, depends what you like. And we're going to do that on both of the handles. And this is what it's going to look like when it's finished. Now we need to make our pocket, so you'll need a piece of fabric measuring about 10 inches by 12 inches, and we start by folding it in half. Now we're going to draw a couple of marks on the top edge for an opening because we need to turn this pocket through after we've sewn it, so you want to leave an opening of about 3 inches wide. Now we're going to stitch along the top and down the sides, and we'll start and end with a back stitch at those marks and down along the ends. And we'll do that on both sides. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam to sew this pocket. You can see what it looks like once it's sewn, and now we just need to turn it through. And you just want to push out all those corners using your tool of choice. I'm using an apple corer, but you could use a chopstick or your scissors. Just make sure it's something blunt so you don't tear through your stitching or your fabric. Now we need to take it to the iron and give it a good press, taking care to fold in that opening nicely. So you want everything to join nicely together when we top stitch it. You can see the opening which is at the bottom of the pocket, and it's all nicely pressed together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the top for our first line, and then move down to about 1 inch to sew the second line. And this is just to give a bit of detail to the pocket. And once I've sewn that, you can see what it looks like here. Now the next step is to sew our pocket to our lining, and I have a piece of fabric here that measures 17 inches by 34 inches, and I'm going to open it up and then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to fold it in half and create a crease along the centre. And the reason I'm doing this is it'll help me to easily centre my pocket piece correctly on the lining. I'm just finger pressing that, and then I'll open it up again. So you don't need to press it with an iron, just your finger pressing will be nice, it'll show up there. Now once I take my pocket piece, I'm going to do the same. So I'm folding it in half to create a crease in the centre. And now I can place the pocket onto the crease line so that it all lines up nicely. Now I'm also going to grab my ruler because I want the pocket to be 5 inches from the top of the bag, like so. And just make sure that you place the pocket with the opening side at the bottom. Okay, so to remember our opening that we turned it through, make sure that faces the bottom. And now you can pin around the pocket to hold it in place. We're going to be sewing this, so using about 1/8 of an inch seam. And just remember not to sew along the top. So you start with a back stitch and leave your needle in the down position when you come to the corners so you can pivot and then just go down the other edge. And you start and end with a back stitch. And that's what the pocket looks like. Now we're ready to sew up our lining piece, and this is pretty easy. Fold the bottom end up and over and line it up along the top edge, and then pin down each of the sides. This is just to keep everything in place while you're sewing. We're going to sew along each edge with a 1/2 inch seam, and we're going to start and end with a back stitch on each side. We don't need to sew along the bottom because we have a fold there, so it doesn't require a seam to be sewn. The next thing we're going to do is sew the main bag pieces. I have 2 pieces of my curtain fabric here, and each measure 17 inches by 18 inches. What I'm going to do is place one piece of the fabric over the other with the right sides facing each other. Now take the time to line them up nicely, and if you're using a directional print as I am, make sure the prints are facing the right way. Now I'm going to sew along the edges with a 1/2 inch seam. Now I'll start with a back stitch. I'll sew down one side and sew right off the edge. Then I'll start along the bottom again sewing right off the edge, and then I will come back up the other side and I'll finish with a back stitch. At this point I decided to clip the corners of the bag just to reduce a bit of the bulk. It is optional, but I think it just helps to get rid of some of that excess fabric in the corners. So then I turned it through in readiness for the next step. We're ready to add the handles, and to do this I'm going to make a couple of marks on the fabric to help me align them. Now I'm making my first mark at 3.5 inches from the side, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side of the bag. So I'm lining up my ruler and making a mark. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark on the back of the bag. So you could flip the bag over and to do that, but I'm just taking the easy way out by folding back the top to line it up with the previous marks that I've made. Now we just want to take one of our handles and line it up with that mark that we made, and then we pin it in place. And we do the same on the other side, line it up on the mark and pin it in place. Now this is also a very good time to check to make sure your handle isn't twisted. And then you grab your second handle and repeat the process on the other side of the bag. Now at this point you could go and sew those handles just to hold them in place. I haven't done that, but it can make the next step easier, and if you do choose to do that, just sew them on with about a 1/4 inch seam. Now we need to place the main bag piece inside the lining piece. Now notice that I still have the lining piece facing the wrong way out at this point, and what you want to do now is line up the side seams on both sides of the bag, and hopefully you can see here that I've lined up with one seam laying in one direction and one going in the other direction. Now I'm going to pin that in place, and I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. So line up the side seams and pin them together. Now we just want to pin all the way around the bag to hold everything in place. Now when you get to a handle, remove the pin and repin it to hold all the layers together. If you already sewn your handles down, you won't need to do this. But either way, just make sure the handles are laying flat when you do this, and that they are actually lying nicely between the lining and your main piece. Before you start to sew, you want to make a couple of marks on the inside of the bag for your opening, as we'll be turning the bag through. Make it about 5 to 6 inches wide so that you don't have a lot of hassle turning it through. And then we just need to sew around the edge with a 1/2 inch seam. So starting at the first mark that I made, I'm doing a back stitch, and as I come to a handle I'm going to back stitch over it a few times just to help reinforce it and give it a bit of strength at those points. And then I'll just continue on sewing all around the edge, doing the same thing, back stitching over each of the handles. And when I get to the second mark I made, I'm going to finish with a back stitch. We are just about there, so all we need to do now is turn the bag through that opening that we made, and then pop the lining inside the bag and just neaten everything up. Now just push the corners through nicely so that the lining sits nicely in the bag. We're going to take it over to the iron and give it a good press, paying particular attention to the opening. So just fold it so that it all lines up nicely and give it a good press. And continue to press all around the edge so that you end up with a nice finish. And you can see how nice and crisp that looks. And that's going to make it easier for when we come to finishing the bag off and closing that opening. We still have an opening at the top, so I'm going to pin that in place just to hold it together nicely. And obviously we need to close that opening, and we also want to create a nice finish around the top of the bag. So we're going to top stitch all the way around with about 1/8 of an inch seam, starting and ending with a back stitch. And you can see here that I'm just going to do that now. And as you come to the handles, take it easy. It depends how your machine handles bulk, but this machine handles it beautifully. And just continue on sewing around, and that just gives it a nice finish. And there you go, our bag is complete, and Sinedra is delighted with it. Isn't it great what you can make from a piece of old curtain material? Now I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and don't forget that the written instructions are available on our website, so check the link in the description field below for that. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tutorials like this.